A medieval peasant's year could begin with a brutal choice: eat the grain now or bury it in the ground and hope it came back as harvest. Their lives did not follow one endless routine. They survived by season. A medieval peasant was not usually a farmer in the modern sense, someone who owned land and ran it freely as a business. He was part of a rural farming household, working land that might be rented, held by village custom, or tied to duties owed to a lord. Some peasants had more freedom than others, but for many, land came with obligations: rent, crops, labor days, and sometimes limits on where they could live or work. That matters because a peasant's work was not one single job. Some of it happened in the fields, some inside the household, and some was owed to the lord as part of holding land. The mistake is imagining one endless routine, dawn to dusk, field to bed, repeated all year. In reality, a peasant's life rose and fell with the land. Spring began with a hard choice: taking grain that could still be eaten and putting it back into the ground. Seed was not an abstract investment. It was food the household had to give up now, hoping it would return later as harvest. Then came the field itself. The soil had to be worked when the weather allowed it, not when the household was ready. If the ground was still frozen, the work had to wait. If it was too wet, heavy soil could turn into mud. If it dried too quickly, the window narrowed again. Ploughing added another pressure. Heavy land often needed oxen, and not every household had enough animals of its own. Families shared, borrowed, or depended on neighbors, which meant one sick ox, one broken plough, or one delayed team could slow several strips of land at once. That is what made spring dangerous. The peasant was not just working hard, he was trying to get seed, soil, animals, tools, weather, and neighbors to line up before the year slipped away. Summer looked calmer than spring, but the work did not disappear. The grain was growing, but it was still only a promise. Weeds had to be pulled because they were not just untidy plants. They competed directly with the crop that would later become rent, seed, and food. But one of the most important summer jobs was not grain at all, it was hay. For a medieval farming household, hay was winter food for animals. That mattered because animals were not background scenery. Oxen pulled ploughs, cows gave milk, sheep gave wool. If there was not enough fodder stored before winter, animals could weaken, die, or be slaughtered before they were needed again. So haymaking was urgent. Grass had to be cut, dried, turned, gathered, and stored while the weather stayed dry. Rain at the wrong moment could spoil the work. Autumn is where the image of the exhausted medieval peasant comes closest to the truth. Harvest was a race against the weather. Grain had to be cut before rain flattened it, gathered before damp made it spoil, and brought in before the year's labor was lost. This pulled in almost everyone who could help. Men, women, and older children all had a role, because harvest was too urgent for the household to divide work neatly. For a few weeks, the village became a single labor force, and the harvest was not finished when the field was empty. The crop still had to be dried, stored, and divided. Some became food. Some had to be kept as seed for the next year. Some went as rent or tithe. For a short stretch of the year, the whole village bent itself around one task: get the crop in before it was lost. Winter changed the rhythm of peasant life. The fields no longer demanded the same daily pressure because cold ground, short daylight, and bad weather limited what could be done outside. This is the part of the year that breaks the idea of one endless workday. But winter was not empty time. Animals still had to be fed, and this is where the summer hay mattered. Every ox that survived winter was future labor for spring. Every cow or sheep that made it through the cold preserved part of the household's wealth. Work also moved inward. Tools were repaired, clothing was mended. Food stores were watched carefully because winter was not just cold. It was a countdown. If the harvest had been weak, the real danger often came later when stored grain ran low and the next crop was still months away. The myth was never that medieval peasants worked hard. It was that every day looked the same. Their lives were not easy. They were survival by season.